To the sun, good morning, sun, rise and shine today. You know you gotta get it going if you're gonna make a showing, and you know you got the right of way. It's a good day, it's a good day, we're moving along. Yes, it's a good day, how could anything go wrong?
Good morning. Hey, we all made it. Woohoo! Great job. You did it. Welcome to our church. Welcome to those who are joining us online. We're delighted to have you here. Welcome to our visitors. You are our honored guests, and we're thrilled that you're here as well. We invite all of you to stay for coffee after the service. Online folks, we have a coffee room online as well. So please stay for that. I have a few announcements as we get going. First of all, we're still looking for folks who would like to represent our congregation at this year's UUA General Assembly. It takes place June 21st through 25th. You can attend virtually for free, or you can attend virtually for not a whole lot of money, depending on how much General Assembly you want. But we are hoping for folks who will represent us and vote in our behalf. We're hoping to have all the applications in by the end of this month so that the board can make their selections. So please talk to me if you're interested in serving in that way. Next Sunday, 5 o'clock, we'll have an intergenerational potluck here at our church. It is all ages, 0 to 100, or more than 100 if you're ed leaders. And we hope Ed will be here. Bring a dish and celebrate the equinox with us. And on April 5th, during this worship service and the 9 o'clock service, we will be having our annual child dedication service. That's when we welcome new children to our community. It's not just babies. If you have an older child that you'd like to see dedicated, they're welcome as well. We invite you to reach out to Amanda Esco. She's our Director of Religious Education, and she can give you the details about that service. And finally, next Sunday is the big day, the day you've all been waiting for. It's Celebration Sunday. That's the official end of our pledge campaign. That's when we get to celebrate all of the wonderful things about this church that make it worth giving for. Our goal this year was $500,000. The total as of this morning that we've raised so far, $374,964. I know, right? Give it up. That's great. Yep. We got a little bit more to go, and our friend Becky Heel is looking for some volunteers who will help her make phone calls this week. So if you have a little extra time this week and would like to donate that time to our church, please just see her right outside this door after service and let her know. I think that's all. Great. This morning, we welcome 3 wonderful lay leaders to our pulpit. Beck Miller brings a moment from lay ministry. Joan Gregory will bring our meditation today. And Lee Shuster brings a message about why he is a steward of this congregation. And we have our junior singers who are also leaders in our congregation. Thank you for your leadership. Yeah. Thank you, Alvin, for that awesome solo. Woohoo! That was great. Now we begin our service in earnest by lighting the chalice. For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and to make our own days glad. Our opening hymn is my favorite one for the time change day, number 38. Please rise.
When I was 16, my hopes and dreams of becoming a pilot or a rocket scientist were yet to be dashed by the reality that I had little to no natural talent in either math or science. That was also the year I took trigonometry and physics in the same semester of high school. It was delightful. I was delightful. To add insult to injury, because I was biologically related to a couple of other natural mathematical idiots, my only option was to go over and hang out at my Uncle Brent's house, where he had 8 other school-age children of his own vying for attention in the evenings. Mormons are nothing if not prolific. Uncle Brent was an educated civil engineer with the patience of a saint. Most nights of the week during the semester, I would drive from track practice straight to his house. There, I was mercifully fed delicious southern food provided by my Aunt Dana, as we were living in Florida, and northern central Florida is just right at the bottom of where the south ends. So Southern food, delicious. And I was given the highly coveted Little Debbie from the pantry for dessert. Yeah, with 8 kids, that was precious. And then Uncle Brent would sit with me for an hour or so telling me dad jokes as he tried to instill even the slightest bit of mathematical competency into my tiny, tiny teenage brain. I reflect back on these memories with a much greater appreciation for my Uncle Brent, who not only sacrificed precious personal time, but who also had to endure an hour or two of monotony trying to explain physics to an obnoxious teenager. Incidentally, that class was the only 100% average I ever received in a high school class. My next perfect class score would not happen again until I attended grad school for a degree in the complete opposite discipline of English. Which leads me to speak of another great example of parental generosity and service. My late Aunt Rosie, who by comparison had almost no patience, let alone the saintly variety, was also the kind of person who would bail folks out even when she didn't really have the money. When my bio mom decided to divorce my bio dad, Aunt Rosie was generous enough to let us come live with her in Florida. This made it possible for my 2 sisters and I to have a fairly stable, if not still slightly impoverished place to live for most of our teenage years. Many years after I graduated from high school and long after I had moved away from home, Rosie did me another kindness by granting me a loan of $2,000 to help pay for my first semester of grad school. It took me almost a year to pay it back, but every quarter I would send her $500 and a thank you note where I would tell her what I learned that semester because of her loan. I share these stories not only because these 2 people were lifesavers at a time that I needed them, but also because I am now becoming acquainted with the thankless and difficult task it is to raise and take care of a teenager. I am reminded of a poem by the late Robert Hayden entitled Those Wintry Sundays. Sundays, too, my father got up early and put his clothes on in the blue-black cold. Then, with cracked hands that ached from labor in the weekday weather, he made banked fires blaze. No one ever thanked him. I'd wake and hear the cold splintering breaking. When the rooms were warm, he'd call, and slowly I would rise and dress, fearing the chronic angers of that house, speaking indifferently to him who had driven out the cold and polished my good shoes as well. What did I know? What did I know of love's austere and lonely offices? I relate to the father in this poem deeply. It is both simultaneously hilarious and galling to have a child look you in the eye to complain how difficult it is to get up in the morning when you yourself were up long before them to cook them breakfast. Followed by going outside in the cold, scraping the ice off the car and digging it out of the snow for 30 minutes before departure, only to have that same child say, "Why is the car so cold?" It's hours of homework tutoring and barely passing grades. It's being told that other adults and parents are smarter and that you, yes, you, are the idiot. Nevertheless, it is also love and commitment, a fear for their safety and sanity that presses you to carry on and endure. You think to yourself, if this one gets their driver's license, graduates, and safely transitions, then you will not only have done your job, you will have given a person the bare minimum to get a fair chance at life. I am now intimately acquainted with that austere and lonely office of parenthood, and it makes me experience surprising depths of gratitude for the adults in my life who recognized my lack of parental resources and stayed committed to my upbringing despite my charmless and selfish teenage self. I appreciate how thankless their efforts must have felt. Now that I am in that same position of helping a child that didn't start out in this world as mine, I pray my service will lead this child to every bit as much happiness, joy, and dare I say sanity as that I've found. My life, despite so much suffering, has evolved into a beautiful and meaningful existence. And in part, I have my uncle and aunt to thank for it. It is my prayer that all children who are lost will encounter at least one caring adult who will invest in them, and that any parent who feels lost and exhausted by a difficult child we'll find hope that eventually we find our way. Amen.
These days, meetings of environmental ministries Saving Great Salt Lake Project begin with verses from Irreplaceable, a collective praise poem for Great Salt Lake, imagined, created, and compiled by Nan Seymour, and written by many, including these verses by Juliana Serena. When the life of someone you love is at stake, you stay with them, even if it's too late, even if it's not enough. Slow down, steady now. Time to keep vigil and be with our beloved Piapa, Great Water, Great Salt Lake, mother, ancestor, friend. Time to relearn again and again how to listen, bear witness, stay with, and not look away. On our first visit to the vigil, Kathy Chambliss and I had the opportunity to spend time with Nan Seymour in her trailer, a short walk from Jim Turner's trailer. You need to know that we were only able to do this vigil because Kathy convinced Jim to pull his trailer out of storage and set it up on Antelope Island in the middle of the winter. Jim pledged his commitment to be the presence of First Unitarian Church for as many of the 45-plus days of the vigil as he possibly could. We are grateful. While we were there, Nan shared with us her vision of the vigil as a ministry of presence with Great Salt Lake. And the LED light bulb lit up for me. That's the thread that's connected all our social and environmental justice work, isn't it? When Vicki took sanctuary, we rearranged our lives in our church around the safety and security of Vicki and the girls, being present with them throughout their 39-plus months in sanctuary. I am grateful to now have the words to describe this work for justice over the long haul. My second visit to Great Salt Lake during the vigil was with Lisa Mountain. Most striking to us were the breathtaking views of the immense wide-open space as we drove to the island along the causeway and then as seen from the trailers. Unlike anything else in the world, we witnessed the dramatically receding shoreline, the buffalo in their own ministry of presence, and the history reflected in the exhibits at the ranch and the visitor center. On the day we left, the weather was harsh, cold, like 6 degrees with really strong winds. That's the day we chose to hang our banner at the trailer site. Our Pride banner, designed by Davida and Molly. With freezing hands and faces, standing on a step stool, Lisa and Jim took turns struggling to secure the banner while I held it as high as I could. The banner and the trailer are symbols of all of us in our ministry of presence with the lake. Not as many of us made it up to Antelope Island and Great Salt Lake during the vigil as we had hoped, but those who did each have stories to tell. There are so many stories. Ask them. Jim, me, Lisa, Kathy and Tim, Paul and Erickson, Susan and Bill, Kim and Katherine, Shirley and Colleen all went up to the lake. Some, like Sandy and Steve and Jim, took part in the drumming and witnessed the presentations of Darren Perry of the Northwestern Band of the Shoshone Nation. Some made day trips, others stayed overnight. Liz Waite has been holding a vigil of her own on the South Shore, walking daily in her ministry of presence with Great Salt Lake. The high school youth, along with their teachers, Amanda, Oswaldo, and Lisa, came back from their visit with Nan and the lake, all fired up, ready to make a difference, and with Liz's help, shared what they learned with members of the Utah legislature. All have been changed by their experience. I added a new practice to the start of my day as a result of the vigil: meditation. Nan invited us to participate in a daily Great Salt Lake facing meditation via Zoom. Breathing in, breathing out, slowing down, picturing Great Salt Lake in all her splendor, in all her pain, staying with her in a virtual ministry of presence. The day of the huge snowstorm, Great Salt Lake gave us a gift, the gift she had been giving us forever, the greatest snow on earth, the lake effect. Was this the last time, I asked? Will we get water to you in time? And each day, as part of my meditation, I recommit to creating a groundswell of energy and voices rising up to heal Great Salt Lake and to open minds and hearts to taking effective action to save her. May it be so.
Hi, my name is Lee Shuster, and I'd like to thank all of you for adhering to the challenges of managing our sundials today. And I'd also like to thank the people attending virtually over in Elliott Hall or the nursery or perhaps online. Thank you for joining us today. I'd like to share with you my first Unitarian stewardship story. I've taught in RE, I've supervised YRUU. For those of you who aren't familiar, that's Young Religious Unitarian Universalist. Served on the Board of Trustees. I've assisted contractors in 2 major renovations in my time, one in this very chapel in 1999, and another that focused on Elliott Hall and the new offices in 2012. Most significantly, some of you may know that I created and managed the AV team for 28 years, the highlight being Jazz Vespers. And one of those high school RE students was Tristan Moore. So I must have taught him something right. Now I've accepted an exciting new challenge. I'm chairing the Buildings and Grounds team. And I'm going to share with you today how together we can make this church and community more sustainable and carbon neutral. Our team is going to work in very close collaboration with our environmental ministry team. And yes, I'm going to announce today a 10-year plan. We're going to try to target a goal of making this building net zero by the year 2032, 10 years from now. Our vision for the Building and Grounds team, I think, is pretty exciting. First, we want to sustain this facility for future generations because these people are very important. We want to make sure their children and their grandchildren are able to come and worship in such a special place. Secondly, we want to help everyone in this congregation or this community to be able to navigate our technology. We want to build community with technology, and we want to help you make more effective use of the tools that we've already invested in. Breeze, Heartbeat, and our team has recently added a new tool called eSpace from Smart Church Solutions, which is going to help us maintain our building better and engage with our volunteers. In closing, stewardship has taught me that being generous with one's time and talent is deeply fulfilling. It leads to lasting friendships, and it helps us build stronger communities. I hope I've sparked your interest. I look forward to talking with you more after church in Elliott Hall. Thank you for your time.
Well, seeing a couple pieces of the ceiling come down right at the time of the offertory is a little too perfect, isn't it? But yeah. So Lee stole my punchline a little bit, which is to say that we have capital funds that are going to pay for the ceiling, and they were raised a few years ago, right? We don't have to pass the plate for that money. We've had people caring for this church all along, giving every year to make sure that the needs of next year and the next year and the next year are taken care of. That's why we're giving, right? We're not giving to keep the lights on today. We're giving to keep the lights on for the next 100 years, right? So that's what I encourage you to think about as we pass the plates around today. A little bit today, your pledge, your continued giving, your legacy giving, it all adds up to a church that we can take care of for the long haul. Thank you for your generosity. It really is a gift to have so many faithful and talented lay leaders in the pulpit. It really is. Thank you, Beck, Joan, Lee. It means a lot. It's a reminder to me that the church is the people, right? Lee and I were having a moment between the services where we were remembering this thing that we did when we were kids, right? And this is the church and this is the steeple. And you look inside and you see all the people. I love that. My dad used to do that with me. But it's an important reminder, right? We are the people. It's not the buildings. It's not the programs, even the ministers, although we always have something to say, and you know that. All of this stuff comes up out of the work that the people do together. And so your words that you've brought this morning have strengthened my faith, and I really appreciate that. The other day I posted a question on my Facebook page. The question was, tell me something good that happened during the legislative session. I don't mean something terrible that somehow didn't happen. I mean something genuinely good, something good for the people of our state. For 2 days, I got 1 like and 1 laugh. Until on the 3rd day, I did hear from my friend, the Reverend Bridget Wire, a Lutheran minister who left her pulpit last fall to become a full-time faith-based lobbyist. She had a bit of good news to share: the beginnings of a child tax credit in Utah that can be expanded in future years to help low-income families. That's good. No one else I knew could think of a single good thing that happened. Now, it's possible that nobody saw the post. That happens sometimes. Sometimes the algorithm gets you. But I think it's much more likely that no one could think of anything good. We've managed to drag ourselves to the end of another brutal session, and the headlines blared the bad news from the very first week. This year, the legislature intentionally put controversial bills in the first week. They claimed it was so that no one could criticize them for waiting until the last minute, when the rules tend to get suspended often in order to move legislation through quickly. One senator said of this criticism that they were darned if they did and darned if they didn't. That is so Utah, isn't it? But I really don't think that that's the only reason why they did that. I think that they put the terrible stuff up front so that people would be taken off guard by how fast it happened. And that demoralizes us and it weakens us. We lose hope, and then we don't have the energy to notice all the bad stuff that gets lined up after that, stuff that won't make the headlines. And it worked, at least on me. That first and second week, I spent a lot of time attending committee hearings and rallies, showing up to support groups like Equality Utah to save gender-affirming health care and legal status for our transgender youth. Hearing transphobic testimony from groups like Eagle Forum, hearing elected officials claim parental rights in one hearing, and then taking those same rights away in the hearing next door. It was exhausting. And by the 3rd week of the session, I really just wanted to cry or nap or eat tacos until it was all over. Because that's my kid they're talking about. That's my family. That's our families here in this congregation. That's our kids, even if it's not your kids, because there's no such thing as someone else's kids. After 2 weeks of that, it's hard to imagine that anything good could possibly have come out of this 45 days, but good things did happen. Full-day kindergarten is now approved and funded for public school districts in Utah. Medicaid has been expanded from 60 days to a full year for new mothers, meaning better health outcomes for moms and babies, and family planning services were also expanded. Several bills passed that make life better for victims of sexual assault and domestic violence, including the establishment of a state database of domestic violence calls so that police better understand victims' stories when they report. Mental health services got a couple of boosts. Funding for assertive community treatment teams, which can provide in-home services for patients with severe mental illness, and more support for MCOTs, right? Mental health crisis outreach teams, which help reduce law enforcement involvement in crisis situations. And HB 228 codified a ban on conversion therapy for minors. It was the first such bill to pass both chambers of a state legislature unanimously anywhere in the country. Yeah. It's easy to forget that these are really, truly good things that became law in a state with a conservative supermajority. And it's also true that 90% of the nearly 600 laws that passed this session passed with bipartisan support. Now, I'm not telling you about all this good news and bipartisanship as a way to soften what happened or turn it into some kind of feel-good story, like it's not really that bad. I'm not. With all that good news and cooperation, the bad news is some of the worst in generations. Abortion clinics in Utah will be shut down on January 1st, making it nearly impossible to get an abortion here. The nearest legal abortion for most Utahns will be at least 6 hours from home. And listen, parents, if you haven't talked to your teenagers and young adult kids about this, please do it today. I did, and it was an enlightening conversation. You should do that too. Transgender youth now have to wait until they're 18 to access gender-affirming health care here in a so-called parental rights state, meaning that they will grow through irreversible stages of puberty and then go through it all again as an adult. And the legislature passed a joint resolution making it harder for groups like Planned Parenthood or Equality Utah to seek injunctions in the courts, which means a legal scramble to try to figure out how to undo all this egregious harm. We narrowly missed the passage of a number of bills that seek to suppress free speech and promote diversity, equity, and inclusion, but those bills are coming back, y'all. And in the meantime, I witnessed for myself the harm done to Black and brown people by legislators who treated them with shocking racism in committee hearings, all while proclaiming loudly that they are not racists. And then there's the lake. Very little was done to put more water back into Great Salt Lake. Very little was done to acknowledge she even has a problem. Bills that would have set a target depth and diverted funds to a new Great Salt Lake Fund never made it out of committee. And why were there so few proposals to begin with? Isn't anyone hearing the alarms going off? Have these lawmakers even seen the lake lately? I know that y'all are hurting after seeing all this damage. Many of you are afraid because your own rights have been taken away. Many more of you are afraid because your rights and your future are now on the table. Virtually all of us are exhausted because the bad news seems to be the only news that makes it to the headlines. So why am I using my precious 20 minutes in the pulpit this month to tell you about the good news from this session? Because I want to draw your attention to how the good news happens, how the good work gets done. Some of these bills were policy projects that people have worked on for years. Senator Luz Escamilla, for example, promoted her bill to provide CHIP medical coverage for children of undocumented families for 10 years, and it finally passed in this session. Senator Escamilla was playing a long game because there's no such thing as other people's children. And after a decade of advocacy, she finally saw justice, and we all get to see it with her. Organizations like Equality Utah and Planned Parenthood and Voices for Utah Children and the United Way and Crossroads Urban Center and the Great Salt Lake Collaborative, these are people in our community who are playing a long game. They can't afford to flame out every session, nor to throw fireballs at their legislators, who will be right back in those seats next year. And you made a difference too. Many of you work for advocacy agencies in your day jobs, and I saw you when you were at the Capitol. I got to hear about the issues you're working on, your long game strategies. I got to meet your allies and see you fostering connections, putting your shoulder to the wheel for one more session. And even if you weren't able to make it up there, I know that many of you were writing your legislators, calling them, texting them, tweeting them, bothering them. That's what it takes, right? People love to get out in the streets and march and yell and make noise, but they often disappear when it's time to do that harder work of facing down lawmakers and policymakers and engaging in strategy and negotiation and building relationships and coalitions. There isn't much stamina in our society for nuance or compromise or persuasion, but that's where the work is. That's where we make the change. It's good to get out in the streets, and we need that. We do need people of all ages and stages to make noise. But that's a flare of a flame that burns bright and hot and uses up all the fuel and then is burned out. We also need people to light a steady flame that can burn slow and low for as long as it takes to make real change. Are we as a community building those skills? Or are we content to just be mad all the time? Because it feels good, but it won't get us where we want to go. If we are content as a church community to turn inward, to congratulate ourselves on how right we are or how woke we are, to focus on ourselves and our own salvation, whatever that means, then we are missing our calling in this community. And we're not that much different, honestly, from other communities focused on individual salvation. The only kind of salvation that actually matters is the kind where our whole community gets saved. That is, where everyone is welcomed and loved and can access the benefits of community. However, we can't be constantly focused outward either, burning ourselves out, trying to save the whole world all by ourselves, when we are exhausted from the effort of just surviving injustice in many cases, of seeing the world we dream about pushed out farther and farther. We need a safe place like this one to land. We need to be able to turn to one another for sympathy and comfort. We need people who get us so we can strategize together, build community, and thereby build power. And we need spaces like this one in which to reorient ourselves to dreams, spaces of safety where we can imagine together the kind of world we want to live in. It's not enough just to focus on what we don't want. We need to be able to dream together, to see as clearly as possible in our minds what we do want, and then test it out. Our congregation can be a laboratory for that kind of world building. And I think a little good news helps us gain perspective. It helps us get up to a high enough place that we can see the moral arc of the universe, how it bends, how long it takes to bend it. We need these little treks up the mountainside so we don't get lost in a valley of shadows. And then, fortified for the journey, we ask ourselves, who needs us now? Who in our congregation needs us now? There are trans people, both youth and adults, who need to hear that we love them. There are people who may need abortion care who need to hear that we will support them. There are people in our congregation who need help learning how to be better anti-racist allies. And they need to hear that that spiritual work is a priority for us. There are human beings in this congregation who depend on the water system of the West for survival. Hey, that's everybody. That's all of us. And we need to hear that we're not crazy for worrying about it. And that we're not crazy for loving the land and the earth and the lake. That kind of love is a natural and appropriate love to feel. Notice here, I haven't said anything about new programs or initiatives. All I'm saying is that we need to love each other in ways that matter. Listening, hearing each other's stories, taking each other seriously, asking what kinds of help would be really helpful, being open to expressions of grief and fear, becoming acquainted with our own vulnerability, being willing to talk about it, celebrating success no matter how meager, celebrating each other in all our diversity, in all our beauty, tending each other's flames for the long haul. May it be so. Amen. Our closing hymn is in the Teal hymnal, number 1028. Please rise with me in body or in spirit. hope you'll stay for coffee because we will have some photos from the vigil at Great Salt Lake. I'd love for you to see what our vigil keepers saw, the beauty and the tragedy of it. So please look for that in Elliott Hall. For now, we close our worship service with these words by Andrea Gibson. A difficult life is not less worth living than a gentle one. Joy is simply easier to carry than sorrow. And your heart could lift a city from how long you've spent holding what it's been nearly impossible to hold. This world needs those who know how to do that. Those who could find a tunnel that has no light at the end of it and hold it up like a telescope to know the darkness also contains truth that could bring the light to its knees. Grief astronomer, adjust the lens, look close, tell us what you see. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, David. If you see a small junior singer, please tell them thank you, and talk to Nikki too. She wrangles them and she does a great job. Thank you to our Sunday morning Sunday morning volunteers. Hey, thanks visitors too. Thanks for being here. We're glad all of you are here. Please stay for some coffee.